Welcome and good morning. This is Daniel Wiśniewski speaking. I'm the coordinator of the Educational Leadership Network Europe. This is our second webinar after our opening ceremony. Some of you might have joined us before, but in case you didn't, this webinar will be dedicated to the attractiveness of the teaching profession. I think one of the key topics and worries, I must say, for all the education professionals. We're going to talk about here about how can we really make the teaching profession more attractive and also maybe more up to date to the current standards of the world of work. What happens? Well, it seems to us that indeed the teaching profession in some ways has become unattractive. There are teacher shortages in many European countries, and we're going to talk about how we could actually deal with those with the amazing speakers just over the time of this webinar. This webinar will be divided in two different parts. Firstly, we're going to speak. Well, we're going to have the European social partners speaking, introducing a little bit the context of this entire problem of the attractiveness of the teaching profession. So we're going to have a presentation done jointly by the Federation of Education Employers and the European Trade Union Committee for Education. Later on, I will give the floor and I will hand over the chairing to Hannah Granger-Clemson, who will be having an interesting debate on this topic with the key stakeholders. So that's really is the schedule for this 1 hour. I hope you're ready. And so we're going to kick it off. First of all, I'm going to give the floor to Susan. Susan is the European Director for the European Trade Union Committee for Education. We have a presentation there about, well, the recently finished project about the attractiveness of the teaching profession, done jointly and performed jointly by the Trade Union Committee and the Federation of Education Employers. So let me just give you the floor, Susan, for the introduction to the theme and to the challenge that is there in front of us. Susan, the floor is yours.
So good morning, everybody. My name is Susan Flocken. I'm the European Director of the European Trade Union Committee for Education. So ETUCE and EFI jointly set their task to develop a joint framework of actions on the attractiveness of the teaching profession. And this came about because we recognized as social partners that social dialogue and capacity building, mutual trust are central when we are addressing these issues. We need that cooperation and engagement and to communicate together about the challenges that we see, but also, of course, regarding the opportunities in education and training. The main goal for us is obviously to improve the quality of teaching and school management. We had become very much aware how much the shortages, but also the low attractiveness in the sector was affecting or is affecting the teaching profession, and also the huge recruitment and retention issues in the profession. So what we did is, as social partners, we had a joint declaration that we would be working towards a framework of actions on the attractiveness of the teaching profession. And we as social partners always have joint work programs that we agree on, where we say what we want to be doing in the upcoming years and the topics we want to focus. And this is just to show you that the attractiveness of the teaching profession is not a new issue for us. So this has been on our working programs for many years. That's where we are developing now also in the future. We want to be looking in particular at a joint agreement on teacher training and also continuous professional development and school leadership, but also on guidelines for sustainable and fair management and the prevention of work overload and work intensification. And we also look at capacity building projects. So this joint declaration, which is the underlying foundation for our framework, very clearly said that we as social partners at European level, at national level, regional and local level, so I say it again, the employers in education, and the trade unions representing teachers in education say that we need to build capacity to participate effectively in social dialogue, to participate meaningfully in education policy making in order to contribute to change and to promote the attractiveness of the teaching profession in Europe. We identified a variety of challenges that are necessary to be addressed in order to achieve this high quality and an equitable and inclusive education system that's fit for the future. So in particular, what we identified as social partners are the demographic changes that we can see in society, the technological changes, societal changes, also with the pandemic, but in general, with other developments like migration and so on, and in particular also the political changes, the willingness to address these topics. So in the project that we did jointly, we had several events together. We started, first of all, with a fact-finding seminar in October 2021. And then we had two sub-regional seminars, one which we held in Bucharest and in Riga, which really helped us to also identify in the countries what are the issues. We had the opportunity to hear from the social partners there about the issue of the attractiveness of the teaching profession. And then we came all together in a very big closing conference in Warsaw at the beginning of last year. And the whole project was accompanied by two experts, Howard Stevenson from the University of Nottingham and also Alison Louise Milner from Aalborg University in Denmark. So jointly, we set up this framework of actions. The framework of actions constitutes or is put together of 31 actions that we jointly agree to, and that should be implemented at European, at national level, and at local level, aiming to increase the attractiveness of the teaching profession, so that in every education institution and whatever level, so whatever sector, whether it's the early childhood education sector, vocational education and training, or higher education and research, that these we should work together to implement these 31 actions. We adopted this document officially in our European Sectoral Social Dialogue Committee for Education. This is in the plenary on the 14th of December last year. So it's very recent. I'm very happy that we have been able to achieve this jointly. And now is actually the important phase, because we will be working together on implementing this joint framework of actions together. The joint framework of actions has got 8 main topics. The first one is about recognizing the role of social partners in education and committing to social dialogue. So we, as social partners, are key to addressing the topic of the attractiveness of the teaching profession, and we want to make sure that this is also seen as the role of us as social partners, and that we bring it into the social dialogue, collective bargaining at national and regional and local level. We want to jointly address working conditions, make sure we have good working conditions in education. We want to jointly address initial teacher training and continuous professional development as key issues for the future to develop this profession, this crucial profession of the teaching profession. We want to be addressing around the curriculum and the autonomy of teachers, or in higher education, you would probably talk about academic freedom here. And then very crucial about the investment into enhancing the attractiveness of the teaching profession. The health and safety of staff, of those working in the sector. Then addressing the status, the recognition of this crucial profession in our societies. And as the last point, we want to make sure that we give ourselves now, we have a 3 years period in which we really want to work intensively, jointly on this topic. And then in 3 years' time, we will be assessing how well we have been doing. Now with this, I'll just lead us into the first topic, and then I will hand over to Daniel, who will be continuing this presentation. The most important point, and you see that is the first point in our joint framework of action, is about recognizing the role of the social partners in education and committing to social dialogue, because we see that this is the tool in where we can make changes. It means that governments, we call on the policymakers to respect the social partners' role and to involve us meaningfully in education and employment-related issues in the sector, and to promote and also to commit to the social dialogue and collective bargaining at the different levels across Europe in order to ensure fair and inclusive working conditions for teachers, for school leaders, and for other education personnel. And now I hand over to Daniel to continue the presentation. Daniel, I cannot see people now. So when you want me to change the slide, you will have to tell me.
Okay, so thank you very much, Susan. Now I'm joining as on my second hat as the Secretary General of EFI, of the European Federation of Education Employers. I still have my old background though, you can see that. So I will not be changing that, because if I would try to work on the digital tools, probably I would shut down the entire webinar and you would have to reconnect again. So I will not do that. Now, coming back to the presentation itself, Susan mentioned here the policy areas that we actually work together with the colleagues from the trade unions in order to make this profession more attractive. Susan mentioned here about the importance of the social dialogue, the negotiations and the discussions with the trade unions, between the employers and trade unions, as is not a common thing in Europe. There's still many countries in Europe where this doesn't even work, or is just a facade, or is not really present. And therefore, we still have to work on this cultural change to make the social dialogue a reality and a normality. In many countries, it's still some kind of a, well, it's some kind of not there. So that was the first point we've made in that joint framework. We spoke about the working conditions of teachers. And of course, in here, you have a great number of things. First of all, it's about, salaries, and how can we really make sure that the salaries of teachers are adequate, first of all, to their profession, second of all, to their educational level, and third of all, to the realities of the labor market. And in some countries, teachers are not, let's say, enough paid in order for the job to be attractive. Second is the collaborative and collegial leadership. We mentioned here, and I think it's the very purpose of this week today, to talk about that, of how can we really involve the teachers in co-designing their profession. And I think that's something that is actually gaining strength in policy negotiations and policy discussions, of entering different stakeholders or bringing different stakeholders to co-design the learning. And it's not just the teachers, it's also the students. Now, it's also about making the profession more attractive, giving the framework of the profession for them to also have a career path that could somehow help them to build on their career and maybe go into leadership or into research or use mobility schemes that are already existing. Pia mentioned in the previous webinar, Pia is the Director General for Education, Culture and Youth here at the European Commission. She mentions in the opening ceremony that there are teacher academies, which is one of the elements that we can use in order to foster mobility of teachers. Now, Susan, I need you to put the next slide now. I cannot see that, I'm afraid.
Yeah,
but,
I'm trying. Now, there we go.
Yes, perfect. Then we, of course, talked about the training of teachers and the continuous development of teachers. I mentioned here that there is a need to rethink the framework of the teaching profession in general. So how is the system of progression in the teaching profession? And also, this is related to the teachers' training. If we want to change a culture in the school, teacher training is key. And it's about developing certain strategies for sector reform. It's about creating supportive entry pathways, and that's induction programs for the education personnel to make sure that they don't leave the profession within the first year. We actually discovered that there's a certain misconception between what the profession actually is and what is being trained in the training centers. And that's something that we need to work on together with the teachers, with the employers, and with the training providers to make sure that this actually aligns. Curriculum and autonomy. I mentioned here, and I think that's something very important, that teachers and all other stakeholders need to be involved in the curriculum co-design. The professionals also need to be somehow involved in designing their job, and I think, or maybe co-designing their job. And I think that requires a cultural shift. Why? Because in Europe we have lots of, education is really organized in many different ways, and if different countries actually organize differently. Yet one thing that we certainly need to promote is an autonomy in the school, to make sure that this common vision that the school leader, the parents, the students, and the teachers bring together can be actually implemented within the framework that already exists. And that's one of the points we've made as well. If I may ask you, Susan, for the next slide. We spoke about the investment. I think that one of the challenges that we see is the investment in education. It's not about excessive investment, because of course also our PISA results or there's OECD data that indicates that investment is key, but overinvestment is actually also not useful. So it's not about overinvestment, it's about crucial investment. And on the employer side, we actually would focus on things related to the school buildings. I think that everyone here have ever seen a school, and normally they are kind of placed in public areas, in public buildings, which require renovation. That is also related to the environmental sustainability issue. And so, and it's also about making the place of work an attractive place of work, because for the young people, the moment they actually enter the labor market, the place you work is actually about also the status of it. We spoke about the health and safety. Of course, health and safety is key, and particularly in the education sector, where the entire profession is about dealing with people, and it's really about leading them into the learning. And you're not only leading the learning of the children, but you're often leading the learning in the household and between the parents. Therefore, all this is really related to that, and that has a significant OSH, occupational health and safety aspect, which we also covered. I think there is one more point, Susan, if I can ask you for the final slide. The status of the teaching profession. The status of the teaching profession is a problem which we believe we have overlooked. And I participate in all kinds of policy debates right now with the member states across the EU, and they indeed say we have actually overlooked this issue. We have not promoted the profession enough. And we have not created a framework of the profession that would be attractive for young people, with the clear career guidance, career induction, and career progression schemes. And this is now currently being rediscovered and rediscussed here at the policy level. And in here, of course, you have all kinds of issues related to the professional autonomy and academic freedom. We speak about different ways of teaching, could be a joint teachers or co-teaching as well. So all these things related to the status, also promotional activities that could help us to promote the amazingness of this job, are key. And yet there's so much to do about it. So these would be the main policy areas which we identified as social partners. Now we're going to give the floor to the stakeholders to actually tell us, is there anything that we could have overlooked, or is there something that you would like to complement? If you would like to reach the final and the full report about this and the full framework, you can reach it on this link that is just on the website. That is again the outcome document from the joint project we have performed. And now I'm giving the floor, and I'm passing to Hannah Granger-Clemson, who will be leading the second part of this webinar, and Hannah will lead a discussion about this topic. So Hannah, I remember some time ago when we spoke one-on-one, I asked you, why is this teaching profession so difficult, and why do we have so much shortage? And you gave me actually 3 points there, where one of them was about, there's plenty of people that would love to be teachers, but for some reason we haven't found them, and we need to look into the way to find them and bring them and keep them in the profession. Hannah, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Daniel, and thank you, Susan, too, for that wonderful description of the landscape. but we've got to get critical now. It's great to make these statements and commitments, but we need to be critical. We need to dig down, as Daniel said. We need to ask ourselves, why are these things not happening? Why are we still asking the same questions? And I hope, as you say, we can move forward a little bit this morning. So welcome everybody to this first session on the attractiveness of the teaching profession. I am Dr. Hannah Granger-Clemson from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, and I will be moderating the discussion with our excellent speakers and, of course, with you, the participants. In the European Commission's 2020 report on supporting teacher and school leader careers, we're reminded that the challenge is not merely improving recruitment and retention, that policies shouldn't be just about boosting numbers and having enough employees, although of course that is necessary. There is this third word beginning with R, and that is in the report, regeneration. And so that means ensuring that your professionals actually want to adapt over time and learn themselves and support their peers to be the best teachers and leaders they can be. And so, in other words, it's about quality, not just about quantity, right? Now, one principle that we all know systems broadly agree on is ensuring support and development opportunities throughout the entire continuum of teacher education and careers, as you said. In other words, starting from before initial teacher education through the first few years of teaching, and then this sense of progression, Daniel, that you said, far beyond that becomes this rewarding journey. But what strikes me from my research and from what I've also encountered speaking to other researchers is the actual imbalance of investment, as you also mentioned, and attention just on that initial qualification compared to what follows, although some might argue that this alone, this initial phase, is still insufficient. So what interests me actually is where systems are changing their approach to think more sensitively about teachers as, surprise, people with their own unique professional identities, rather than being all alike, having the same desires, having the same lives, and being just another number. And what also catches my attention, and as we already heard in the opening ceremony, is this difficult challenge of the broad range of stakeholders involved. We know there are supporters, influencers, mentors of teachers. But how do we really make sense of that beyond saying, oh yes, we all need to work together? It's a complex community. Everyone has different needs. And how do we actually improve the profession and lead change? That's our common challenge. So I'm really pleased to welcome our three speakers today who will be sharing their perspectives on this important topic. Sandra Pieterfiete from the European Commission, John McGowan representing the Teachers Union of Ireland, and Rodrigo Melo from the Association of Private and Cooperative Education Establishments in Portugal. Just a little word on the format of this webinar. Each of the speakers will be responding to one or two questions for 10 minutes each, and then we will open the floor to your questions, and that the speakers will also be happy to respond to. So, participants, please do share your reflections, your ideas, your experiences in the chat if you can. So the chat there can be accessed with the top menu in Teams. And if you have specific questions for the speakers, please use the question and answer tool, the Q&A that you'll also see at the top, so that we can also bring those in after the speakers. We've heard from all three of them. Now, before we get into that discussion, we're going to start by watching a short video created by the European Federation of Education Employers, who are, of course, the joint hosts of this session. Now, they interviewed people from different countries who had previously been teachers about their reasons for joining and for leaving the profession. Now, I've had a sneak preview of this and I found it incredibly powerful, raising many of the issues that, of course, anyone, us all working in the education today, we're clearly aware of, but to hear it in their own words and to see those words on the screen is really quite powerful. So I invite you to sit back and watch the video, which should appear on your screens in the next few moments. Thank you. It's a tough watch. I think we know none of that is new to us, but it's difficult to see it, and I know it hurts, and you want to fix it. But let's move on positively, and let's see what we can discover in this dialogue today. There was something there that the teachers mentioned already about, you know, the time that they needed, what it felt like to be in the school they were in, and that's already been mentioned by the chat. Someone who asked about school time and structure and those working conditions. Many of the known working conditions that can cause this lack of motivation and stress to existing professionals, as well as potentially preventing new candidates from wanting to become teachers. So let's see if we can find ways forward. Again, if you have the chat function, share your own ideas. And if you have a question for any of the speakers, please add these to the Q&A tool. So turning to our first speaker, Sonia Pietrafita, you work for the European Commission and authored the report on structural indicators, which includes really incredibly rich data on different system approaches to the teaching profession. What measures have you seen member states and other countries taking that seem to be working on this idea of attractiveness?
In fact, I authored the report on the structural indicators on the attractiveness of the teaching profession following Commission's effort last year for their annual education and training monitor, where they included a chapter on the teaching profession and a dashboard with indicators on the teaching profession. And therefore, we were asked in the Education and Culture Agency that manages the Eurydice network to produce this report with indicators. These indicators, some of them refer indeed to or show how European countries are tackling the growing problem of teacher shortages. 27 of the education systems participating in the survey reported having policies in place to address this problem. 5 other countries reported having them only for certain subjects and specializations, but gives a picture of the magnitude of the problem. And what are they exactly doing? Well, many of these policies indeed touch upon some actions that Danielle and Susan already mentioned previously. Obviously, there's a lot to do from what I heard, but let's have a short view on these actions and policies. Some policies aim to improve forecast and planning, mobility across regions and schools, publicity, or just simplifying recruitment procedures. A few countries provide incentives to part-time teachers to work more, or to teachers at the age of retirement to stay longer. Other measures consist of the possibility to recruit non-fully qualified teachers while they achieve or obtain their teaching qualifications, or just to ease the qualification requirements to make it easier. In many countries, the focus is indeed placed in initial teacher education programs, often with the objective to increase the number of graduates, like, for instance, increasing the capacity or the vacancies in these programs, or giving financial support to IT students, or improving the flexibility of the programs in terms of content or in terms of time. But there is also a tendency to reinforce the work-based learning in these programs. So this can contribute to make the programs more attractive on the one hand, but also I had before talking about how many teachers are increasingly leaving the profession during the first years. So when you reinforce this work-based learning in IT, you somehow make the prospective teachers more aware of the challenge they will face and better equipped to face them. It is also common to offer special education programs for already qualified teachers to obtain a second qualification in another subject or specialization. Some countries supplement these policies with communication campaigns. So we heard a lot about the low social image or reputation of the teaching profession. we have also a last group of policies that target something that we all find crucial and that has already been mentioned before, and that is not other than the working conditions, to encourage all these IT graduates to stay, to enter the teaching profession and then to stay. And these policies can be increasing salaries, but it can also improving the workload, like giving more assistance, reducing bureaucratic tasks, reducing teaching time. It can also consist of offering support to teachers that are newcomers, financial support or guidance. Or it has also been mentioned, and it is also very important to create career opportunities so that people can have a sense of progress and development.
Thank you. I mean, it sounds as if there's a huge amount going on, all in different countries. There are so many approaches that systems are trying to take to work on this issue. It sounds like all of these things would make the teaching profession more attractive, and yet we're still asking the questions. And even I see it posted in the chat there, as you mentioned, this idea of alternative pathways, routes in, perhaps an apprenticeship model, trying to get more teachers in and trying to hold on to them in the first years. But I think what is perhaps missing, is it true that we don't actually understand the impact of these? Because there are policies, but are we missing the research to actually know what the impact is? Is that true?
It is. The report doesn't collect evidence on the impact of the policies, so I cannot say much about the success of these policies or not. What I feel is that there's still a lot to do. There are not either best practices that everybody could apply, because as said before, the education systems are very different. The understanding of the teacher shortages and their cause is very different across European countries. So there's not a magic policy that everybody could be applying. I could be giving you some examples that I found interesting. For instance, regarding the work-based learning in the initial teacher education programs, France has reinforced school at practice at school in the education programs for primary teachers, and has introduced the pre-professionalization program for both primary and secondary teachers. That means that they combine the university students with paid traineeships at school. The Netherlands, for instance, has a 6-month minor in university for some disciplines, where certain graduates, where they have special shortages, can both take their studies in physics or mathematics or some other disciplines, and at the same time get a teaching qualification. So they study both things at the same time. Similarly, in Luxembourg, you can study whatever bachelor's other than education, but get a double degree in education. So that ensures somehow that people that may be interested in other specializations, they also have the opportunity to get a teaching qualification in case. For instance, in Denmark, they target more graduates in other disciplines, but that are already working. So after 2 years working in the private sector, they can access the merit program, and it's a special education program for them to enable them to teach. Something also very interesting related to these alternative pathways, but I find them quite interesting. It is something that is increasing found in the Eastern European countries. For instance, the Motivated Teachers program in Bulgaria, the Teaching Force in Latvia, the I Choose to Teach in Lithuania, or Teach for Romania, that consists of select certain people with talent and vocation that may be specialized in other disciplines that are necessary in the school as well. and then offer them a 2-year contract. Sometimes it's specific school, sometimes can be any school after a short selection process. And then they get a 2-year contract to teach. At the same time, they follow university studies on education. They receive mentoring and specialized support at school. And finally, because it was mentioned before, the importance that teachers to focus on career opportunities and especially on the well-being of teachers as individuals. I would like to mention the case of Luxembourg that has put in place many measures to diverse and create career opportunities for teachers, but also to provide coaching, individualized support and training on issues like how to find a better work-life balance, how to identify and prevent burnout, how to deal with stress, how to develop resilience, a positive attitude, skills and confidence to go through the first years in the career, and many other issues related to the well-being. And also special training and coaching for school leaders on educational leadership and on how they can support better teachers.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Sonia, for sharing some of those. And we look forward to perhaps hearing some more later when we come back to the questions and answers and the discussion section. I'm going to turn now to John McGowan from the Teachers Union of Ireland. John, you hear a lot from your members in schools as well as discussing matters with authorities. And we can see in the chat as well, people are asking questions about working conditions, about salaries, about the length of the sort of teacher education opportunities, the amount of time it takes to become fully qualified. Where do you see Ireland in particular doing well in terms of improving the attractiveness of the profession, and where are the prevailing challenges? And you just need to unmute yourself.
My apologies. Thanks, Anna. Well, where are we doing well? We're lucky in Ireland insofar as we are still attracting high quality applicants for teacher training, be it for the concurrent courses, which are typically 4 years in duration, or the consecutive courses, which involve undergraduate studies of 3 to 4 years, plus 2 years of professional teacher training studies. So we are continuing to have people who have a clear interest in becoming teachers. The difficulty is that we are losing a very significant proportion of those people at the point where they qualify or within the first 3 to 5 years of qualification. And it is not solely because of nominal salary. The nominal salary of teachers in Ireland is quite good. It runs from in the region of 43,000 euro at the commencement point to 75,000 euro at maximum, and that's for an unpromoted teacher. So that is competitive vis-a-vis other graduate entry professions in the country. However, what is not competitive is the fact that when you come into teaching, well, first of all, before you come into teaching, you will spend 5 to 6 years of unpaid training, if I may put it like that. And you will then spend typically 2 years, maybe a minimum of 2 years in fixed term and usually part-time work. So the first time that somebody can aspire to being permanent and in full-time work or something approaching full-time work, he or she will be in the region of 27 to 28 years of age. Now, I put it to you as an absolute certainty that at that point, people are making life choices. And the life choices involve cost, whether to start a family, buy a home, or rent a home. And teachers are in an exceedingly poor position at the wrong period of time in their lives financially. So the cost of remaining in teaching in terms of life choices is sometimes excessive. So what do Irish graduates do? Well, many of them choose Dubai over Dublin, and they go to a place where they can have better money, largely untaxed, put together the finances that will allow them make life choices. Let's say typically to try to buy a home. The other thing that is happening is that those who are qualified as teachers are being attracted out of teaching by the prospect of more stable contractual positions at an early point in their career. So, for example, we have a college which is dedicated to the training of and very, very high quality training of home economics teachers. And apocryphally and actually, a very significant number of those teachers were immediately upon graduation recruited into the agri-food business because the opportunities there were far more immediate and far greater. So that's one thing. The second thing is and I think hugely importantly, and you mentioned it in your introductory remarks, Anna, you said that teachers are people too. The system forgets that. And most of the commentary is about how you can improve the lot of teachers as teachers in their functioning as teachers. But you have to remember that their first obligation when they rise in the morning is to themselves and or to family. And teaching has become so intensive and so extensive that people are making conscious and logical decisions either to limit their exposure to teaching by going to part-time or job shared work, or else exiting from teaching, either early in the career or before they go into late career stages, because their time is under enormous pressure. And if one is to ask why time is under enormous pressure, I think there are three issues at least that deserve to be considered. One is the changed nature of the classroom, which is a good thing. The classrooms in Ireland are now inclusive. Ireland went from being a country where a very, very small proportion of the school-going population had been born outside the country to a country where in the region of 20% of the school-going population was born outside the country. So we are a diverse society now. We have properly included children with additional needs in the inclusive classroom. But an inclusive classroom of 30 students is a different proposition to a classroom of 30 students, all from a similar background with a similar level of ability. And that intensification of work has not been taken account of. The other thing that has not been taken account of is the effect of digitalization. We were told when computerization was the term that we would work smarter and it would make work easier. It did not. It did not. It made work harder and more extensive, and it extended work in that regard outside of work time into home time. And I think the other thing that needs to be borne in mind is that the profession does not, apart from having little regard or insufficient regard for those coming into the profession, it has a tendency to burn off and burn out those in mid to late career, because it assumes that the physical energy that you can summon up will be the same at age 60 as it was at age 30. And that simply is irrational. So there is a need for a policy that allows people to step back from full-on intensive teaching to a combination of teaching and other appropriate administrative and mentoring duties as they approach late career stage. So those three things would help. And the last thing I want to say has to do with school, with what happens at school level. Because of the intensification and the extensification of work, everybody in school is under more pressure. It has led, probably an unintended consequence, but it has led nonetheless to to lip service being paid to democratic and collegial culture, where the actual culture is becoming more directed and more autocratic, not because we have management that is of itself autocratic, but this sheer pressure of workload is forcing people into taking decisions unilaterally, where decisions at school level critically, and Daniel made reference to this, must be the product of collegiality. And in respect of collegiality, the best colleague that school management has is the local union, because a local union can summon up and draw in all of those who otherwise are disparate. And I'll give you practical examples of that. In Ireland, during the pandemic, the schools that had the lowest infection rate for COVID-19 were the schools that were most heavily unionized, because between them, unions and local management brought a greater rigor to ensuring the safety of students. Those were also the schools that were most engaged with students who could not attend school. In other words, the remote connection was less remote for those students. And also the measures, two measures that have had most effect just in equalising pay, which was an issue in Ireland, because there was unequal pay as between teachers who had entered the profession pre-austerity and those who entered post-austerity. But those who mobilised for and secured pay equality, thereby removing one of the major structural barriers to recruitment into teaching, were the unions. Without the unions, the pay equality would not have been achieved. And it was actually union money. Senior members of the teaching profession providing their own money, which came by way of a national wage round, to reinstate the training and teaching qualification for younger teachers. Mm-hmm. So we bring that solidarity, without which schools cannot operate. So school culture is massively important.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. You preempted my second question, which was indeed about that local level leadership and support, and really interesting evidence there from Ireland. And I look forward to coming back to you in the Q&A session in a little bit. You also touched upon, and I hopefully started to answer a question that came up in the chat about the influence of AI, perhaps also digital tools, where you said indeed there's an assumption that it would make teaching easier, take away all these administrative tasks, but in fact it's made the teacher's role more complicated and therefore potentially more stressful, and moving into those other life spheres where indeed teaching seems to be having that impact and needing then whole life decision making. I'm going to turn now to Rodrigo Mello, if I can. Just before that, just to say that another question in the chat there, John has created some slides with his speaking points on and some links there. So they will also appear in the chat and be shared with you. So thank you very much, John. Rodrigo, you're from the Association of Private and Cooperative Education Establishments in Portugal. So what is your perspective on the climate, on these attitudes, and are there examples from Portugal that might help us to imagine ways to improve the attractiveness of the profession, perhaps in particular about teaching councils and school leaders, but also in general? Thank you.
Oh, hello, Hannah. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for having us today. Well, I have been listening carefully to all that has been said, and it also always strikes me very important that we in Europe we are facing the same problem, teachers shortage, even not all countries in the same amount of the shortage. And I would bet that in all countries we have very different reasons for the shortage. I was listening to John and I was thinking, wow, the entry level wage per year of 44,000 in Ireland for a teacher. In Portugal, it's 22. Entry coming out at 77, and in Portugal, it's 49. So very different pays, very different teaching hours, very different teaching conditions. And this is what we are seeing in the private sector in Portugal. You know, each school is tackling the shortage of teachers in a different way and with different proposals. And I think really this is the way forward for Europe as a whole, in the sense that you do not have one magic bullet that will solve the problem, you know. And for some teachers in some countries, it's more pay. For other teachers, it's better work-life balance. And for other teachers still, it's just about being able to come in the profession and leaving after 5 years, because really they would leave whatever profession because they want to try different things. And so I think we have a very complex problem in our hands, and we will have to find different solutions. And I can give you an example from Portugal, from in the independent school sector, and regarding social bargaining and the social dialogue. For the last years in our work with the unions in Portugal, we have been always trying to find ways, of course, to have a good baseline, or as good a baseline on teaching conditions in the private sector as possible, but always respecting the fact that different schools will find different solutions. And well, in the very big public systems, you have a minister or a local education authority responsible for thousands of teachers. And well, it's easy to understand that this person or this institution needs a one-size-fits-all solution. But when you look at the private sector, you see that some schools are really respecting teachers' work-life balance. And so I have some members that, look, at 4:30, you go home and nothing goes with the school. And you only have to think about school at 8 o'clock the next morning. You do not have to think about the school on weekends. You do not have to think about the school on recess. And they have found they are recruiting very talented young teachers who really say, look, life has changed. I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to use my time on my terms. And so I do not want more pay than what you are giving. I want respect for my time. You have other schools that are really having to pay more. And even in sometimes I have some members that we have, well, teachers who are working really long hours and being paid really well for those long hours. And again, other people do not want this, you know, and that's something I think we have to bring into the equation, is different solutions for different people. Because as John said, each teacher is a person who has his or her own way of thinking, of organizing their lives, of wanting to move forward. But then, of course, there's the individual approach, but we do have some more institutional, more general approaches that we think are important to look into. One thing is tech in school. And I fully understand what John means when he says, and that's true, that technology has given us more work at home because of emails and chats and this and that is completely true. But we do believe that, well, on the one hand, this is not artificial intelligence, this is just communication. But we do believe that we have to really look into how can we reorganize the school day and the school week in a way that we do have the technology to do all of the administrative tasks. We do have the technology to do a lot of cognitive micro assessment. We do have the technology to help struggling kids on this or that, or to help gifted children to. So we do have to incorporate more technology and let teachers do what they do best and what no machine can do. It's the human relation with students. In one of the testimonies that we saw on the screen some minutes ago, there was somebody that said, well, teaching now is not anymore lecturing, and so a lot of other problems, and I went away. And I was thinking, wow, this person was in the wrong profession from the start, because teaching is not about lecturing, we think, you know. And so we are thinking on ways to reorganize the way we deliver the teaching so that the learners have a different experience, and we could have, you know, find a better way, a better deal for our teachers, even having less working time and concentrating on better jobs. And for instance, we have learned with the pandemics that kids, especially on upper secondary kids, well, they can do a lot of good work autonomously or in small groups. We do not have to have them in the classroom with the teacher. And so if we find a way to better assist them in their autonomous work and keep the time with the teacher for more in-depth things you are struggling with, or incentives, so you know, all this, maybe we can have more learning hours with less teaching hours. And there is something to be said here about reorganizing schools. And I would say that we really should look at it this way and try to see how we can be very more effective with maybe less burdening teacher time, you know, and respecting more the teacher. Because at the end of the day, there is a very clear fact for us in the independent sector, because, well, parents pay tuition. So unlike we have to pay more to the teachers. We have to give a better life-work balance to the teachers, but we cannot charge double to the parents. So there is the need to find creative ways, and that is why we think it's important to integrate technology and work around the organization as we know it today. We need to find clever ways to do it.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo. I'm going to come back to you with a question that I'm then going to ask to the other speakers as well, because there are the chat is on fire now, and people are posting some really interesting observations. First of all, this came up in the chat about what can be done realistically by a school leadership team, a senior leadership team, or by the school head themselves, and then what can be done by policy. And of course, we could say that some things, as you said, are just, it's what teaching is, but there are some things you think that could be done by leaders if they are just given the freedom, or perhaps they need to be supported by policy to enable them to do it. So are there specific things about improving the conditions of teaching, including, you know, how that fits into work life, that you think school leaders could specifically work on?
Absolutely, Hannah. I think we are still in the school sector looking at teaching in the traditional one teacher in the classroom with his or her group of students lecturing it. And we are also looking at school leadership in the traditional way of get the schedules out, make sure everybody is in the classroom, and so on and so on. And both approaches are outdated. As school leaders today, we should think more and more as really facilitators of well-being within the school. You know, a school leader is not about getting out schedules. I have to understand what is going on with that teacher. I have to approach and have a personal relation with the teachers that are within my team. I have to try to understand that maybe that schedule is really putting the stress on that teacher. Maybe we could change the schedule. Maybe I could tell one teacher to hook up with the other teacher because he or she is struggling with dealing with this, but the other teacher is very good at doing that. So we have to have more leaders that look at themselves as, you know, team leaders, as coaches, as people who go much more than the administrative day-to-day tasks. So I think school leaders really need to think out of the box. And of course, policy is important, but policy will never solve our problems. It never has at the school level. Look, we cannot think about school as a community and then say, well, the minister should do, well, the minister is not part of our community. And there are a lot of things we need policy, of course, but at the end of the day, the human relation, managing people, getting together, the school culture does not depend on the minister. It depends on the students, the leaders, the parents, the teachers. And so I think looking at schools as real communities and taking care of the culture is something that we sometimes do not do enough. We should do, we have to do. And maybe we will be surprised at the outcome of that, you know. And let me just pitch in one more thing that I think as adults we are not doing a very good job, is that inspiring our students to become teachers. Look, we get the feeling that if you are long enough in a classroom, your dream of becoming a teacher may be destroyed. Because, you know, So again, the school culture is important, not only for the present day people in the school, but also to create a sense of, at the end of the day, how good it is to be there. We cannot be always squabbling about everything, at least in front of the kids.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a bold claim you make there, or suggestion, that school leaders feel, or should be able to feel, that they can operate independent of policy decisions when we talk about top-down education management. Policy, I'm sure would those who are policy officers would like to think that what they are doing is supportive. Now I'd like maybe to come back to Sonia on that point. Have you seen anything, or what's your view there on the ability of policy to, in particular, work on the challenges of this, the well-being and the work-life balance and the working conditions of teachers?
I see Rodrigo's point, but I tend to disagree a little bit, because you can have a very nice community in a very beautiful, well-preserved neighborhood, or in a neighborhood full of trash and no green at all. I mean, the community is important, but whatever structural is behind that community, encouraging it, motivating it, leading it, and supporting it, I think it's also important. And in particular, I already mentioned the example of Luxembourg regarding the well-being policies for teachers. I think it's increasingly in the agenda of many European countries. Portugal has recently, if I have a good understanding of it, maybe Rodrigo can also confirm this, has also done something regarding the career progress and developing career opportunities. The government has taken it very serious and has developed a framework on that. There are other countries that have done this together with the DG Education in the European Commission that has led this exercise. And there are other measures related to the fact, for instance, there's increasing importance given to the fact that it is in the teacher appraisals that normally take place with school leaders, that is a good opportunity to identify the needs for teachers to develop their skills and competences and to provide access to it. And Susanna mentioned at the beginning the importance that both employers and employees get into the system to make sure that the training opportunities really fit these needs and these interests, because the situation is changing very quickly, and these teachers want to deliver sustainability at school, and they want to deliver digital, but they also need to be equipped with the skills and competences to do it, and being given the time to get equipped with the skills and competences.
Thank you, Sonia. You touched on a point also. It was a question raised in the chat there about school buildings and resources, and the desire for teachers to want to work with different tools to provide exciting opportunities, as Rodrigo said, that means that learning is enjoyable in that way. I remember an example from the Brussels area where teachers could only really get out to go to museums and to sporting opportunities once the education officers had a conversation with the policy officers in transport and agreed an arrangement with the local transport and the buses company that could then provide the opportunities to actually get the children to those places that were not immediately on the other side of the street from the school. They had to get there. So as you say there, Sonia, it's the sense of community is not just within the school, but actually around the school, and the feelings and the opportunities that come with that. That's a really interesting point. We've only got time for one more question because of time. John, I'll come to you with this. Somebody mentioned in the chat the idea of respect. This in general, a whole population's attitude to teaching, which Rodrigo and Sonia have also mentioned. This might also be helped or hindered by the news media, what's seen on social media. Do you have any ideas, or what do you hear from your members about the way, the sort of respect for the profession?
Well, again, I hope this doesn't sound self-satisfied, but one of the strengths of the Irish system, and I know, for example, it's one of the strengths of the Scottish system as well, is that the population generally, society generally, prizes education. Education has been seen and has been proven to be the lever that is most useful in acquiring some sense of social justice, in allowing people life progression and the satisfaction of their own ambition and the exploitation to the full of their potential. So we have, generally speaking, got if you like, a background that is positive towards teaching and towards education. There are, of course, occasions when the media isn't kind, but I would equally have to say, in fairness to the media, that it is not generally unkind. So I can't and won't blame media. I think social media is different. Social media is different because there is a toxicity that, if you like, can come to hold sway in particular instances. In terms of respect, you show respect, I suppose, and you mentioned in the previous question, Anna, there was mention of the importance of policy. I think it's important to have policy that shows respect. So in Ireland, teaching is a regulated profession. We have a teaching council, which we all love to hate, but which equally we wouldn't do without. Because what it does is to ensure quality, ensure standards, and it maintains respect, both self-respect and respect externally for teaching. The other thing is public policy in terms of pay rates, and this is where I would depart from what Rodrigo said. I would not atomize policy and, if you like, create a market force that decides pay rates. Pay rates are important because if the pay is the same for somebody walking into a school in an area of extreme socio-economic disadvantage as it is for a teacher walking into a school in an advantaged area, there is at least mutuality of respect for the teacher walking in the door. Policy is also important, and in showing respect for those sections of society and those cohorts of students who are from birth at a disadvantage, because policy can seek to provide for them the resources that otherwise they would not have. And I'll take a very obvious example of that. In Ireland, policy has respected the need for schools to achieve equity. And in so doing, it gives premium resourcing to schools that are in areas of socioeconomic disadvantage. That shows practical respect. And respect is not something illusory or something sort of, it's not a will of the wisp. It is something you feel when you see the conditions within which you work and when you see the extent to which the state values that work. So I think that where respect is lacking is in the two areas I already mentioned. Respect is lacking in terms of there being inadequate understanding of the pressures faced by young people who happen to be young teachers, and also in a lack of understanding that the experience gained and the expertise accumulated by senior teachers is not sufficiently tapped into. I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm not going to look for. I'm not going to look at the media and say that is our problem, because in Ireland, quite frankly, it is not.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so we're going to have to close our discussion for now, although I'm sure it will continue throughout the week in the other webinars. As a brief summary, I think we can agree that we can identify shifts in policy and practice that are addressing the issue of attractiveness, but it's something that requires national backing and investment and respect, but with that careful, localized cooperation and action. You know, making something, including teaching, attractive is easy to leave to an external ideal, wait for someone else to say what teaching is and should be. And this was very well expressed in the chat by one of the participants. It's something for the professional community themselves to also grasp with their own hand too. So I think my final take from what we've heard, it seems that measures to improve attractiveness, they need to be sustainable, that attempting some kind of quick fix with extra cash or trying to fast track teacher education is a huge risk if it's not set within a framework of improving all aspects of working conditions and professional development over the course of a career. I would like to thank all of you, the participants in this first session of European Educational Leadership Week. I hope you will enjoy the other sessions you've registered for, but the comments that you've made, the questions you've asked have really made this a very interesting debate to kick off the week. I hope you enjoy those other sessions. It's a diverse and packed schedule. Again, please follow the network website for other opportunities throughout the year as well after this week. And finally, thank you so much to the speakers, Sonia Piedrafita, John McGowan and Rodrigo Mello, for contributing your expertise to the discussion. And thank you also to the host for this opportunity for dialogue. I will now pass back to Silvia Passini, who I believe will guide participants to the next webinar. Thank you very much.
I will all disappoint you. I'm afraid I'm not Silvia Passini yet. But Silvia will indeed take over the leadership of this, at least from our headquarters. Silvia Passini is the project manager here, and it's the person who is with her entire team. You don't see that, you just see my face. But we are right now in the recording studio with 1, 2, 3, 5 people here. Just behind the curtains. You will see some of them throughout the week, as they will be chairing a couple of different events. But just wanted to thank you for this insightful discussion. I think we have a lot of things to do to change. I think one question I was having was about the access to the profession. Is there any way we can actually make it easier to access and to try to somehow bring people from other and attract other professionals to the profession itself? It's never been answered, but maybe we can do it in the next webinars. Now, stay with us. We will have 15 minutes break, but in 15 minutes, we're going to the next webinar, the webinar about the early childhood and care and school leadership. The link has already been posted. It's on the chat. In case you have not registered, in order for you to get the link, you must register. Therefore, do that right now in case you're interested in this. The webinar will be led by the colleagues from the trade unions, from the ETUCE, and from our side, from the headquarters. Well, the chairing of it will be now taken care of by Silvia Passini indeed. Now, with me, you will meet me again tomorrow, 9:15 in the morning, for a session on our YouTube channel called Education Chatter. In case you have not subscribed there yet, look it up. Education Chatter is our new channel that discusses educational policies, but not only policies, but in general education. We have amazing interviews. Tomorrow we're going to record our first first interview with a public. So we invite you to join us there as public on game-based learning with Andre Thomas. So game-based learning, in case you're interested in pedagogical innovations, this is a topic for tomorrow, 9:15. With me and Andre Thomas. And for now, grab a coffee, get some stretch, and come back to us in 15 minutes. Thank you very much.